Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Friday Reads. After 2 weeks, I have a lot of books that I finished or almost finished. And again, last week, no videos because I was at my mom's. If you follow my channel for any length of time, you know that by now, that once a month I'm going to my mother to help her out. She doesn't live close by and then I don't film videos. Anyway, books that I finished. And the first one was an impromptu, pick, a non-fiction book. So it qualifies for non-fiction November, but it wasn't on my list. I just came across it by chance, as it sometimes happens, and it's wonderful. And that is Kayla Schuler's The Trouble with White Women, which was published earlier this year. And I found out about this book through Twitter because Brittany Cooper, whom I really admire her work as a Black feminist, she wrote the foreword. So the book is looks at the history of feminism in the US, and then it especially looks at the overlooked women of color that were active in feminism. And what the author does is she pairs a quite well-known feminist like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who worked for the suffrage, women's rights to vote, and a less well-known, in this case Frances Harper, Black or women of color feminist who had a similar agenda, worked at a similar time, but had a much more inclusive approach. Nowadays, you would say intersectional approach. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton was not in favor of, the vote for Black people. She wanted the vote for white women. So that idea of white feminism that we now thankfully talk about, and telling me as a white feminist something about the feminists of color that I probably have never heard of. I really enjoyed this book. It was very educational. The pairing thing worked very well because it gave you context. I sometimes thought it was maybe the language and the writing was maybe a little bit too scholarly to appeal to a broader public. I thought that was a pity. I mean, the author is a scholar, but some people, like Brittany Cooper, they can write scholarly work and they can also write work for a general public. And I think this one sometimes struggled a bit with the scholarly language, but it was certainly a good book. And if you're interested in the history of feminism, especially in the US, and especially and in particular want to learn something about all the feminists of color that we now don't celebrate or who are almost forgotten, then I can highly, highly recommend this one. The next one was a classic, Mill on the Floss by George Eliot, first published in 1860. If you follow my channel, you know that in 2021, author spotlight, as I call it, was George Eliot. So I planned that I would read all of Eliot's novels, the novels that I hadn't read yet. There is one left, Felix Holt, The Radical, which I will read in December. And then, if I manage to do that, then I will have accomplished this goal. Mill on the Floss. Not my favorite George Eliot, to say that right up front. The writing is fantastic, as it always is with George Eliot. But I wasn't too taken with the story. It's about siblings, Maggie and Tom, from their childhood. They're about a couple of years apart. So when they are in their let's say between 6 and 8, and then all the way up to adulthood. So it spans a decade or more. And the focus is on, the coming of age, and Maggie is a bit, she's feisty, she wants to do something. And Tom is more the down-to-earth, I would say conservative. I thought he was quite a prick a lot of the times. And yeah, the story, the plot about what happens to Maggie and Tom, especially when hardship hits, financial hardship, things like that. I thought it was really, really, really slow, even for a Victorian writer. And I just didn't. I always, with this book in particular, I felt that George Eliot really had it in for the girl and later the woman, so Maggie. Whereas I felt that Tom, like I said earlier, was quite an idiot and not pleasant. But, you know, anyway, so this is not, absolutely not my favorite, but I still enjoyed it, like I said, because the writing is gorgeous, as it is always with George Eliot. And the next book I finished is a book that you picked, all of you picked. You remember a little while ago I did this sort of bucket list video where I presented 10 books that have been on my shelf for a long time, and I asked you which one should I read, and the two winners, I promised that I will read in November and in December. And the first winner was a short story collection by Carol Shields, Dressing Up for the Carnival, first published in 2000. And I finished it, I think, a week ago or something, and I really loved it. There were maybe, the most of the short stories are very short, so they are quite, I think there are 20 in this collection, or even more. And there were only maybe 2 that I thought were, and the rest I really, really enjoyed. It was quite a different collection than what I'm used to read. Carol Shields' work. I read 2 other short story collections previously, because a lot of the stories were quite absurd and yeah, sort of non-realistic in a way, if you know what I mean, but not sci-fi, but just absurdist. And I love those. I absolutely loved this collection. And for a short story collection with more than 20 stories, to have only 2 that I thought were like, you know, that's really, really good. So thank you for picking this book for me. And in December, I will read the next one. That is Sarah Hall, How to Paint a Dead Man. The next 3 are all books that I started more than a week ago, some even 10 days ago, and that I read for Nonfiction November, and all of them for the Prompt collection. And if you remember, if you watched the video, you might remember that I interpret collection as more than one. In other words, more than one reader, Buddyreads. So these are all books that I read together with somebody. And the first one, and I have to again, of course, look up the publication date. Yes, 2017. The first one is Penelope Lively, Life in the Garden, which I'm reading, or I read because we are already finished. So this is a bit of a cheat. We finished yesterday with Joe Smith, who still doesn't have a channel, and who probably never will, but who is a fantastic buddy reader. And I really enjoyed it. It is about, it's not that long, and it is a rumination. Penelope Lively, of course, I'm sorry, is an English writer. She won the Booker with Moon Tiger, a book, by the way, that I didn't like that much even. And I have read 1 or 2 books by her, but she's not a writer that I read now a lot. But Joe came up with this suggestion because it's about nature. And I'm a city girl, but I try, since I met, Doris and especially Heidi, but also Joe, who is a farmer, who has not a garden, but a farm. So she grows stuff. I'm trying to educate myself and read more, about the nature, about plants and things. And this one, Penelope Lively, is a gardener, was always a gardener. She's now in her 80s, but it's not a memoir really about her and her gardens. It's more topics around the garden. So for instance, time. and the garden. What does it mean to garden in reference to time? So you plant for the future. What is a fashionable garden? How did fashion change with regards to garden? So there are these chapters with certain topics, and of course she will also talk about her own experience, but it's not in the foreground. And I loved the tone. I loved what I learned about it. I loved that it's not pretentious at all. And some chapters work better for me than others. You know, the country and the difference between a town garden and a country garden, I thought was really delightful and educational. And some chapters just didn't resonate as well with me. But yeah, I think for everybody who is interested in gardening, this is an absolute fantastic pick to read. The next book with the prompt collection, my next buddy read, is with Adam from Memento Mori. And of course, I will leave links to channels or Instagram accounts in the show notes for all my buddy readers. And we are reading Living by Fiction by Annie Dillard, first published in 1983. Now, Adam read quite a bit of Annie Dillard's work. She's an American author. She writes poetry, nonfiction. She published 2 novels. And I tried one, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, didn't work for me, DNF'd it long time ago. I read a book about writing by her, which I quite liked, and one other book that the title escapes me. I was not a big fan. Adam is. So it's really interesting to read this with somebody who knows her work much better than I do, and who also really enjoys and loves her work. Now, this is also not a memoir again, but quite short little book about her thoughts and ruminations and contemplations about fiction. It's a little dated, 1983, because it focuses on the postmodern writers and what they can't do and how it works, the integrity of writing. So she tackles universal themes, I would say, regarding fiction, but the focus is on something that maybe now 40 years on is not that much anymore in the focus if you think of fiction. But it's still very interesting. She's quite funny, I mean sharp, but also quite funny. I have some questions regarding the works that she features, because it's, I would say, 99.9% male, white works, you know, the typical usual suspects: Faulkner, Beckett, Rob Grier, you know, Proust, what you expect if you Kafka, but there are very, very few women. As she mentions Virginia Woolf, of course. Virginia Woolf is always in the, you know, when we talk about modernists like James Joyce, then Virginia Woolf comes up, and she talks about Doris Lessing a little bit, but 99.9% of the writers and the works she features are works by white male writers. And I feel that is dated as well. You just wouldn't do that anymore in 2021. But actually, the works of those writers is not that important. What is important is, for me at least, is what Annie Dillard says about fiction. And a lot of it I think is brilliant and really thoughtful and thought-provoking. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm certainly enjoying the buddy read with Adam, of course. And I have a little bit of a, you know, irks me a little bit that there are so few female writers and no writers of color in her collection, and that she doesn't talk about it. You know, I think you should at least say why you made this choice. But again, 1983. So that is the next one. And the last one I'm reading with Sandy, and that is Jessica Bruder, Nomad Land. And this is the horrible, I mean, I love Frances McDormand, but I hate movie covers. And this is the a picture from the movie with Frances McDormand that was made on the basis of Nomad Land, and it's from 2017. And Jessica Bruder is a journalist, and she got interested in people who are living in their van and traveling, nomads. So they travel all over through the United States. They take temporary jobs, for instance, as camp hosts, in national parks, but also a lot of them work for Amazon regularly. And the idea behind it is to get a picture of that life, and also she personalizes it. So we have a couple of people whom she follows. One of them is Linda, who is just in her 60s and lost her home, doesn't have any savings, and decided this is the only way that I can live, because I just have no money to afford rent. We will finish this book this weekend, and I will say, spoiler alert, didn't 100% work for me. The first part was excellent, but it went a bit downhill from there. So beware when I talk about this book in a wrap-up. And the last book is a book that I really just started yesterday. I read 10 pages or something, and that is here, The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson, which was published in March of this year, 2021, and which was sent to me as a gift by Heidi from My Reading Life, because I was really interested in reading this beginning of the year, and I couldn't get the book, as it sometimes happens, and she just sent it to me. Not even a birthday or anything, just, what friends do. So thank you, Heidi. And then no, I didn't just put it away and didn't read it for half a year, but I saw that the Book Naturalist Book Club, run by Heidi and Doris, picked this book for November. And I thought, well, then I'm going to wait. I'm going to put it aside, and I'm reading it with all the other book naturalist book club people in November. So that's why I started this book. It's I think it's the only fiction book that the Book Naturalist Book Club reads this year. And it also qualifies for Indigathon because Diane Wilson is an Indigenous writer. And this is the story about a Dakota Indigenous family. The main character is Rosalie, who grew up, on a reservation, but then left, married a white guy, and lived for 20 years on a farm. And then when her husband dies, and that's all not spoilers, you will read that in the first 3 pages. After her husband has died, she returned to the reservation, and then the story takes off from there, and it's about seed keeping, the importance of seeds, and the importance of the connection with nature. Heidi loved it. She already finished it. Jo Smith, with whom I talked about this book incidentally yesterday, she also loved it. So I'm really excited that I will finally get to read The Seed Keeper. And these are all the books that I almost finished, started a while ago and just started. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. I'm looking forward to your comments as always, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.